So all month I've been talking to you about various forms of domestic violence, and tonight I want to engage you in discussion about psychological abuse. And for those of you who aren't completely aware of what psychological abuse is, it's also known as emotional abuse or psychological violence. And it's a form of abuse that's characterized by subjecting or exposing another person to a behavior that can result in psychological trauma of that person. And that psychological trauma could look like anxiety, chronic depression, clinical depression, post traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD, amongst a number of other psychological problems. And more times than not, psychological abuse is associated with situations of power imbalance in abusive relationships. And it could look like gaslighting, it could look like bullying, it could even look like abuse in the workplace. There are a number of behaviors that can result in the person that is being abused feeling unsafe. And it's important to be able to recognize it because a lot of times um, those signs, if you will, are subtle. But for starters, if you or someone that you know is experiencing domestic violence in any form or fashion, you can call 911 or the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1 800 799 7233, or you can use Touchtone Dial at 800 787 3224, or you can text START, START, to 88788. As I've said each week, it is October, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and it's an opportunity for each and every one of us to join forces to raise awareness about the far reaching impact of domestic violence. There's a movement called Everyone Knows Someone campaign, and that's true. Domestic violence in any form can be so subtle at times that you might not even be fully aware that it's going on. You may have something that sort of raises your curiosity or makes you go, I wonder, things that make you question whether or not someone that you know is being abused. But more than likely, there is someone in your network, whether it be professional or personal, that is being abused. So being aware and being sensitive to what's going on around you is really important in order to be instrumental in helping someone that is being affected by domestic violence. So, what are some signs? What are some signs of psychological abuse? And here's the thing why being able to recognize the signs is so important, because again, they're not always easy to spot. So you actually have to pay attention. And I understand that it's really hard to do that sometimes, right? We all have our lives. We all have our own issues and situations and circumstances and stressors that may be going on in your life. And you're not necessarily fully present. You know, we talk all the time about emotional intelligence and how important it is to be aware of your surroundings, to be aware of what's going on. One of the things that I mentioned to you last week is that I challenged you to start being more deliberate, to start being more intentional, to notice what you're noticing. In other words, sort of falling back and paying closer attention. Even though you have your own stuff going on, it's still really important to be aware of what's going on with other people around you, because I'm sure many of you know by now that it's easy at times to get sucked into the vortex of other people's drama. It's easy to get sucked into the vortex of the other things that are going on in people's lives around you. And you don't ever want to be in a situation where you get blindsided by something that's going on with somebody that you love and care about or somebody that you work with. So it's really, really, really important to pay attention So, what are some indicators that somebody that you know or connected to in some way may be getting psychologically abused? You're seeing more frequently that they're visibly upset or agitated, or perhaps someone that is usually very happy-go-lucky, they're very jovial, they're, sort of the life of the office, or, it's the cousin or the friend or whomever that is usually pretty upbeat, but you are interacting with them and you notice, wait a minute, something's off here. You're usually upbeat, you're usually jovial. What's going on? It, it it may be an indication, particularly if that's not how they normally are, that something is going on from a psychological perspective. Or the flip side, one of the ways that was a tell when people closest to me started to become aware that something was going on is because I was starting to be more withdrawn. I was starting to be unresponsive. I wasn't returning calls as quickly as I normally would. I wasn't as detailed in my text messages, or I would, end calls abrupt and abrasively, and just not as available or as present as I normally would. And it raised flags, right? It made people start questioning, hey, what's going on? This is different for you. Another thing that may be an indicator is you're finding that people that you're normally connected to on a pretty regular basis, they're starting to avoid you, or you're starting to see an indication that they're a little scary, or tend to be more timid or nervous whenever they're around you, particularly if the person that is psychologically abusing them is in their presence as well. You're noticing this shift in that they just aren't acting the way that they normally act. That definitely may be an indication to you that they're being psychologically abused. Or it could be like really extreme, like they start to behave in unusual ways. When I tell people, this is not an indication, right? I'm a rocker, right? How I self-soothe is I rock, or I shake my leg, or I shake my foot. But if you're close enough to someone that you are intimately acquainted with what their normal behaviors are, and you start to notice that they're rocking or biting their nails, or that they tend to engage in more oral behaviors, meaning like, you notice that they're chewing on their finger, or they're, holding onto a straw, or whatever the case may be. One of the things that I used to do, and I didn't even realize I was doing it until somebody brought it to my attention, I was collecting rubber bands. I had a bazillion rubber bands around my wrist, and I would pull at them and tug at them, and pop myself with these rubber bands, and I didn't even realize that I was doing it, but it was part of how I was releasing the negative energy that was building up in my body because of the abuse that I was being subjected to. But then you have to take into consideration the subtleties. What do those subtle signs look like that you may be more inclined to really not even think anything of it until, like I'm saying to you now, start to pay attention, and you begin to realize that more frequently, every time you guys have plans, they're canceling the plans. And a lot of times those cancellations are coming at the last minute, and there's no legit explanation, or you find out that the explanation that they've provided for you later on wasn't exactly what it was. And and I hate to say it this way, but you start to catch them in the lie. They say, oh well, I'm not going to be able to have dinner with you because the kid is sick, or because I had to, I had a flat tire, I had to go take care of this. And then later on in a future conversation, they contradict the reason that they gave you for why they canceled dinner. That could be a tell for you that there's something going on behind the scenes that they haven't disclosed to you. Um, Another one is that you are all out together, or the person and their partner at your house, and you're starting to notice that they're talking to your friend or your family member or your coworker in really hurtful or diminishing ways, or they're engaging in physical behaviors that are belittling, degrading, demeaning. And you're starting to notice, every time they're over here, the rare occasion that they do show up, you're noticing the little slick comments. You're noticing the little mean things about weight or outfit or hairstyle or how you walk or how you talk or whatever. You're starting to pick up on these cues that are an indication to you. Hmm, this person that I care about is under attack. Something else to take into consideration, somebody that is otherwise or has previously historically been really talkative, you're starting to notice more frequently that they're becoming more quiet. They're starting to sort of fall back, and particularly when the abusive partner is around, you're noticing that the answers that they may be giving you or their contribution to the conversation is nowhere near as substantive as it used to be. They may be overly apologetic. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I didn't mean to say it that way. Or you notice that in the midst of conversation, particularly if the abusive partner is around, that they're stumbling over their words or they're getting the side eye. And the moment they get the side eye, they immediately fall back on whatever it was they said, or they apologize for something that didn't even need apology for, and you'll say something like, oh, don't even worry about it. It's not that serious. There was no big deal. And they're like, no, no, no. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it that way. And you're noticing that, okay, what is going on here? There's all of these excessive apologies for things that don't even warrant an apology. Uh, Someone who is normally decisive, someone that is normally sort of quick on their feet and like, yeah, we can do this, or no, we can, or whatever the case may be, you're starting to notice that they're behaving in a more indecisive manner, or it appears to you that their responses or their behavior or their posture even may be conveying to you that there's some insecurities there. Someone that usually is, very well dressed, very well kept, or whatever the case may be, and you notice that whether it's when they come to work or you see them in the grocery store or whatever the case may be, or they're at your house, they seem to be more self-conscious about their appearance, more self-conscious about virtually everything. That is a subtle indication to you that there may be some psychological abuse going on. What about those individuals in your life or with you? You're noticing that there's this tendency towards being rushed. Rushed, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. I gotta get home, I gotta leave. No, I can't stay late. I normally would. That may be an indication to you. Here's a big one, especially in the age and time that we're living in, where everybody's phones are glued to their hand or glued to their hip or constantly on their desk. And you're noticing that the person is constantly checking their phone. They're constantly checking their voicemail. Or every time you look up or you pay attention, it's like you're talking to them and they're not paying attention to you because they're texting their partner, or they've only been at your house for an hour and a half, and in that hour and a half the partner has called 3 or 4 times, and you can see the person getting more and more distressed. And then lo and behold, what happens? You know what, I gotta go. Let me get home, because I don't want to hear it, I don't want to deal with it. That's all subtle indications to you that the person that you're connected to may be experiencing psychological abuse. If you or someone that you know is experiencing abuse in any way, shape, form, or fashion, you can call 911 or the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. There is help available. There's resources available to you that you might not be aware of, or resources available to you that you may be aware of, but you're not completely sure how to utilize those resources to help you to get some resolve in your situation. You have to remember that any form of abuse, including psychological abuse, is designed to cause you emotional and mental harm. It is designed to compromise your health. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is perfect. And we all have the ability to do things that might bring harm to another person from time to time. The difference, though, is abuse is a conscious decision. It is a deliberate and persistent attempt to harm, belittling, degrading, demeaning. It's about exerting power and control over and over and over again to the point that it compromises your confidence, your well-being, and your self-worth. We all make mistakes. We all may, crack a joke or make a comment about somebody's hair or outfit or whatever, how they walk, how they talk, how they chew. It's it goes both ways. It could be men that are being subjected to psychological abuse, or it could be women that are being subjected to psychological abuse, or it could be your children. But you have to remember that this abuse can take on a bunch of different forms. It can be intimidation, it can be coercion, it could be bullying or ridicule or humiliation, it can be gaslighting, it can be harassing you, it can be isolating you, it can be oppressing you to the degree that you are silenced and you no longer have the courage to speak up about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you need, what you want. It can be manipulation in all types. It can be over the top manipulation, it can be subtle manipulation, but it's manipulation just the same. It can be control, it can be threats, it can be name calling. All of that are forms of psychological abuse. And let me tell you, folks, it can happen to anyone. I've shared before that, I spent time working at the Domestic Violence Intervention Shelter, and I've been doing this work as a therapist for a long time. And I will tell you that abuse does not discriminate. I've shared with you the statistics, and yes, we know there are definitely some groups that are more prone to being abuse victims, but psychological abuse can happen to anybody. It can happen to anybody in any type of relationship, including, let me just say, including friendships, working relationships, intimate relationships, and relationships within your family. I'm often amazed at how frequently abuse happens within the family system because people have convinced themselves that sharing DNA with someone, hanging on the same family tree with someone, is somehow a license to have to tolerate abuse, neglect, and maltreatment. And I cannot stress enough how false that is. Sharing a bloodline with somebody does not give them a right to abuse you. Unfortunately, child abuse and intimate partner abuse are among the most common forms of abuse, and they are absolutely considered major public health issues. So when you look at the fact that psychological abuse can occur in any relationship, and you take into consideration that child abuse and intimate partner violence are two of the most common types, I want to shine the spotlight on child abuse for a moment. What does psychological abuse look like in the context of child abuse? And you all have heard me say, this is my hot button. This is my hot button. I struggle to extend grace to child abusers. I'm being totally transparent right now. I really, really do. I struggle to extend grace to child abusers. Um, they are by far one of our most vulnerable populations. And for someone to abuse, neglect, mistreat a child that didn't even ask to be here, like, what are you doing? So, what does that look like? It looks like yelling and cursing at children. I've noted that's a way of life for some folks. I've noted that some people communicate through screaming, yelling, hooping, hollering, cussing, and fussing. But when you are yelling and cursing your kids out, or kids whose life that you're a part of, it could be your nieces, your nephews, your biological children, your stepchildren, the kids that you're babysitting for God's sake, that's abuse. It is abuse, it is neglect, and it is damaging. If you find yourself constantly criticizing or picking on a child, abuse. If you are humiliating or talking down to the child, abuse. If you're blaming or punishing the child for adult problems, you're an abuser. If you are threatening to hurt the child or to abandon them, you're an abuser. If you are failing to create a healthy and safe and stable environment for the children that are in your life, you are an abuser. If you are allowing the children in your life to witness violence or abuse at home, you are an abuser. If you are not concerned with the child and you refuse others' willingness to help the child, you are an abuser. So what does that look like? What does it look like when children have been subjected to psychological abuse? It looks like difficulties in school. They just acting out. You tired of going up to the school? Well, why are they acting out? Why are they struggling academically? What role do you or the other adults in their life or their environment, is there abuse in the environment that's contributing to the difficulties in school? Is the child having trouble sleeping? Is it evident to someone like me that the child has developed an eating disorder? Is the child having mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, or difficulty regulating their emotions? Serious question. Are there other behavioral issues like aggression or acting out or lying or being a people pleaser? Does your child have physical issues? Are they wetting the bed? Are they having bowel movements on themselves or in the bed? Are they having chronic pain or headaches or other physical issues that absolutely can be an indication to you that there's abuse? Are the kids engaging in risky behaviors? They drinking, getting high early, they promiscuous, hypersexual, vulgar language. Folks, I need you to understand that psychological abuse can be just as damaging to children as physical and sexual abuse. But it's harder to detect. One of the one of the frustrating things as a clinician, or truth be told, just as a human being, is seeing situations where the child is definitely behaving in ways that are not considered healthy, and the parent's default is to beat the brakes off the child. Everybody and I don't mean everybody literally. Folks are quick to go to punishment. Folks are quick to think that the way to solve every freaking problem is to beat your kid. And that drives me up the wall. Did the thought ever cross your mind that something is wrong? And oh, by the way, if something is wrong, and maybe you're not the perpetrator of what's wrong, meaning you're not the abuser, the moment that you resort to, the moment that you resort to corporal punishment to address the behaviors that you find problematic, you've just become a part of the problem. I am begging you to stop being so quick to punish and be quicker to explore. Stop making the assumption that the reason why your child is making the mistakes that they're making or engaging in the behaviors that they're behaving in is just to piss you off and frustrate you. I heard something powerful. My associate pastor at church said something that was freaking profound on Sunday. She said, stop making other people's healing about you. And my interpretation of that is this. If your child is engaging in behaviors that are outside the norm of what would be considered healthy behavior, chances are it's not just to piss you off. Chances are it's not just to get your attention because they want new tennis shoes or a new bike or whatever the case may be. Children don't have, dependent upon the age, they don't have the psychological or the social maturity at certain stages of the life cycle to be able to put into words what they need to put into words to let you know that something is wrong. So what do? They act out. And what do? You beat the hell out of them. And then wonder why they keep acting out. They keep acting out because they're screaming the only way they know how to convey to you something's wrong. So my challenge to you is be the mature, responsible adult in the room and do some exploring to find out what's really wrong, rather than beating your kid within an inch of their life, thinking that that's somehow going to make them change their behavior. Because it doesn't. It only makes matters worse. If you are a victim of child abuse, or you know someone who might be, you can also call or text the National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-422-4453 to speak with a professional crisis counselor. Intimate partner abuse within the psychological context. According to the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey conducted by the CDC, the Centers for Disease and Control, 49.4% of women and 45.1% of men have experienced psychological aggression from an intimate partner in their lifetime. You know how huge that is? You know how many people that represents? What are some of the examples of intimate partner abuse in a psychological context? Wanting to know what you're doing, where you are, and who you're with at all times. expecting you to be in constant contact or checking up on your whereabouts, wanting the passwords to your phone, email address, and social media accounts to track your digital activity, monitoring your spending habits and controlling your money, getting jealous and frequently accusing you of cheating on them. And that speaks to a whole bunch of other stuff too, but yeah. Making decisions on your behalf, like what you'll eat or wear, or often without consulting you. Trying to keep you from meeting your friends and family, discouraging you from working or going to school or attending social events, deterring you from getting medical help or advice, getting angry and abusive in ways that scare you, cussing at you, calling you names, or treating you like a child, ridiculing you or humiliating you in front of other people, threatening you or your loved ones with bodily harm, threatening you with police or legal action, a lot of times for made up reasons. Threatening to hurt themselves when they're upset with you as a way of manipulating you and controlling your behavior. Telling you things like, if I can't have you, nobody will. So what happens when you're being psychologically abused? What does that look like in how you're showing up in life? You know what it does? It shatters your sense of self. In other words, you feel more and more every day like you're unwanted and undeserving of love and respect. You're saying things out loud into yourself like, well, if I hadn't done, or if I hadn't said, or if I hadn't worn. But if you're honest with yourself, because I can't see you, but if what I'm saying is striking a nerve, you recognize that you're feeling hopeless, powerless, guilty, or ashamed. If you're honest, you're feeling more controlled, manipulated, or used. You're so overwhelmed and stressed out, you don't know what to do with yourself. You are in constant fear of saying the wrong thing, of doing the wrong thing, of being the wrong place at the wrong time, and all of the things. In other words, you walk on eggshells every minute of every day of your life. You wake up walking on eggshells, you go to bed walking on eggshells, you at work walking on eggshells, you at the grocery store walking on eggshells. You afraid you might buy the wrong size ketchup. You're in constant fear of doing it or saying it or being it wrong. And you're not even who you authentically are because you are so afraid of upsetting your abuser. You start to question your sanity. Well, man, you know what? Did that really happen like that? You know what? Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe you know what? Maybe I'm just, maybe I'm being too sensitive. It's all in my head. It didn't really happen. No, but it did. It happened exactly the way you thought that it happened. But now you've been abused so long, you're questioning your sanity. You're questioning whether or not you really saw it the way you thought you saw it, whether you felt it the way. Did you just, yeah, you did. It's real. You were belittled, degraded, demeaned. And again, this is not gender specific. It goes both ways, folks. You are struggling to focus. You're struggling to sleep. You're struggling to enjoy life. Matter of fact, you're in such a low place that you've been contemplating suicide. And I need you to know that a permanent solution to a temporary problem is never the answer. There is a way out, But it's going to take courage. It's going to take a leap. It's going to take bootstrap strength. And it may even take some discomfort for a minute. But you're worth it. You are worth learning the necessary coping skills, the appropriate, healthy coping skills that can be instrumental in empowering you so that you can get out. Because God knows you deserve to. You deserve, I don't care what you have done, I don't care the mistakes that you have made. Nothing that you have done, nothing that you have done warrants you being abused. You got to recognize that you're being abused. One of the things that we say in the behavioral and mental health world is the first step to recovery is admitting that there's a problem. You have to recognize that it is that bad. Stop telling yourself it's not that bad. Abuse in any form, in any capacity, is a problem. You, with all the embarrassment, shame, and humiliation, not telling you what I heard, telling you what I know, with all of the embarrassment, shame, and humiliation that comes with admitting that you are being abused, you have to own it. And you have to admit to yourself and a certain group of others that you are in fact being abused. You have to get out of that abusive situation. And how do you do that? You have to create a safety plan. And you have to leave as soon as you can. And you've got to be able to seek help from trusted friends, family members, neighbors, law enforcement, and other organizations that can be instrumental in helping you to get out. And not only get out, not go back. And I'm not suggesting that you don't ever go back. I'm suggesting that if you ever do go back, there has to be real, quantifiable, identifiable change. And that change doesn't happen overnight. It's not likely to happen in a month or 3. It takes time for an abuser to address the behaviors that need to be addressed so that they don't abuse. They got to get to the root of what's causing them to abuse. I strongly urge you, if you are a victim, to maintain a record of the abuse. And that record needs to be kept in a place or space that can never be accessed by the abuser. And here's the other thing, and I mentioned this last week when I talked about there are behaviors that you can engage in that elevate risk. That is in no way, shape, form, or fashion me blaming the abused. What I'm saying is don't engage with the abuser so that you're not increasing the risk of being abused. You can control you. You're the only person that you can control. So you get to decide how you're going to react to the abuser, which is going to require you to put firm boundaries in place and refuse to engage in that, because they're going to suck you in. That's the effort. They're going to try to suck you in. You get to decide whether or not you're going to engage. And the engaging is going to keep you stuck in that vicious cycle that can keep harm coming your way. When it comes to any form of abuse, you have to remember that you're not to blame. Abuse, and I've said it every week, abuse is a choice. But Dr. Pitts, you don't know what I did. Dr. Pitts, you don't know what I said. Dr. Pitts, you know, no. There's no justification. There's no justification for abuse. If you have said or done something that's so egregious that your partner feels like they have to abuse you, you two shouldn't be together. If you have done something that's so egregious that your family members or your friends or your coworkers think that they have to abuse you, you've got to change who you're allowing to have intimate access to you. Everybody makes mistakes, and some mistakes are big. They're major mistakes, but that's still not a license to abuse. It's not. You have to decide if you're going to allow yourself to continue to be abused. Nothing that you have done, nothing that you have said is justification for you being abused. So what that looks like is you have to work on developing and sustaining healthy relationships. You have the ability, you, the person being abused, you have the ability to break the cycle of abuse. You just have to realize it. I know you don't feel like you have any power, but you really do. You get to decide if you're going to develop the self-awareness and learn, because it is a learning process, and learn how to distinguish healthy relationships from unhealthy relationships and behaviors across the different types of relationships that you have in your life. Yes, I get that it can be hard at times to trust people or to let yourself be vulnerable, but each of those things are important components in establishing and sustaining healthy relationships. Things such as mutual respect and trust and affection. You teach people how to treat you. Never complain about negative behaviors that you tolerate, because you set the standard. You set the standard for how people treat you. So you can't say, oh, well, everybody abuses me, because my pushback respectfully and gently is going to be, well, what's going on with you that you keep tolerating people abusing you? That's why seeking help is so important. I tell folks, I said this to a client right before I came into the live. There's such a stigma in so many communities and so many ethnic and racial groups about therapy, and somehow the distortion that if you go to therapy that makes you crazy. I want you to start telling people, I'm going to therapy so that I don't go crazy. How about that? Change the narrative around therapy. I'm not going to therapy because I'm crazy. I'm going to therapy to keep from going crazy. I'm going to talk to someone that can be instrumental in helping me to understand why I am the way I am, why I think, feel, function, and navigate life the way I do. I'm going to therapy so that I can connect with a neutral person that can help me to process my emotions and that can help me to develop healthy coping skills, to build my self-esteem, and to heal from the trauma that I've experienced from being abused in relationships or throughout my whole life. I'm not crazy. That's why I'm going to therapy. That's why I'm making a conscious decision to seek help. You also have the option of joining a support group. They're confidential. You would be surprised at the number of people who have similar experiences as you that can be instrumental in helping you to learn, that help you to be inspired and encouraged. You would be amazed at how participating in a group can be a life-giving and life-breathing experience for you that could be just what you need to muster up the strength to change. It's up to you. What are you going to do? Are you going to continue to stay in this abusive situation? Or are you going to realize that you deserve better? You're going to realize that you deserve more healthy relationships and interactions and experiences. It's time, folks. Aren't you tired of hurting? Aren't you tired of being the doormat? Aren't you tired of being the bullseye of the joke? You, each of you, set the stage for how people treat you. And you don't have to be abused another day. Help is available to you. You just have to take the first step and decide that you are going to break the cycle today. Today. It's time. You're worth it. That's all I have. I'll see you next week.